Hello and welcome to the 25th Congressional District Candidates Forum, brought to you by SCV-TV, KHTS AM 1220, the Signal newspaper, and College of the Canyons Cougar News.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for having this today. I think this is a very important forum for the candidates to be able to voice what they're going to bring to the table. I want to be your congressman for several reasons. One of them is I'm very committed to this district. I have a long-standing family relationship with this district. I have either lived in Santa Clarita or the Antelope Valley for about the last 35 years. This is my home. This is what I want to help. These are the friends and family that I grew up with. These are the friends and family that I want to help when we go to Congress. I think that Congress is going in different directions right now, and they're not in great directions. I do want to be on armed services because I think the footprint here, the imprint here in the Santa Clarita, the CEMEX Valley, and the Antelope Valley have a huge impact on what we do, what our fighting men and women can do, what the DoD impresses upon us. I think that armed services is part of what we should be impacting out of this district. I am endorsed by just about every major person, major elected official in this district, from Supervisor Michael Antonovich to Supervisor Peter Foy, to both the runners, to the Santa Clarita City Council, to the Palmdale City Council. That's complete. So I would like to go there and voice your opinion on behalf of you in Congress. Thank you.
Legislative efforts to stop the CEMEX Mine have failed repeatedly. It's a pressing issue for this valley. What would you try to do differently?
It's one of the major priorities in Santa Clarita. Outside of water, we do have to fix water in California. We have to fix water. That would be the top priority, I think, would be addressing this district. The CEMEX Mine has not had leadership over the last 10 years. It's taken forever to get anything at the federal level, get any discussion. I know, working with the City Council in Santa Clarita, they were at a standstill of trying to get something to happen. And finally, when it did, and it didn't go very far, it seemed like the ball was dropped again. Now we do have two senators that have picked it up, and they are kind of moving forward a little bit, but we'd like to have some leadership in Congress to pick up this very important issue and run with it. That will be one of my priorities when if I am elected to Congress, to stop this CEMEX mine.
Which congressional committees would you like to be on, and why?
Well, it's very easy, Perry. I do want to be on armed services. I do want to be on transportation. I think that those are two areas that will dramatically affect this district. If you look at what's going to happen over the next 10 or 20 years, let's just take transportation for one. The highways that connect our valleys, if you connect the 118 or the 14 or the 5, they're all going to have major issues over the next 20 years. We are not going to stop growing. In fact, we expect to grow very quickly over the next 4 years as we pull out of this recession. So I think the transportation has a dramatic effect on what we do here in this congressional district. Armed services, obviously, it has a huge imprint here. With the President's budget coming out and cutting 4 to 5% over the next 5 years out of the military is not acceptable. We are not able to fight on more than one front if we continue that way.
What would you do to improve the success of industries such as aerospace, television and filming, and manufacturing, which have traditionally been important to this region?
Thank you very much. No one has been more impactful for aerospace than I have in Sacramento. I have hosted the Aerospace Week the last 2 years. In fact, it was just 2 weeks ago. I've dealt with Northrop, Lockheed, Boeing, Raytheon, on down the line to our subs that only have 5 or 10 employees. 2 years ago, I authored a bill called Spaceflight Indemnification and Liability. That was passed in 1 year. When it tried to be passed for 5 years by other members, we passed it in 1 year with bipartisan movement. And that basically says that you're going to have to sign a waiver if you go into space with some of these companies like Scale Composites or Xcore. And that means that we can have that type of space flight here in California, and it won't be dragged to Florida and Texas and Colorado. On the film, we've got to be better. We've got to compete with Louisiana and Michigan, who are stealing a lot of our film right now. But we are seeing more permits in the Santa Clarita Valley and the Antelope Valley and I have co-authored the film tax credit.
How would you assess the role of healthcare reform so far, and what changes would you like to see?
Well, I think that there's a huge problem right now. I would vote to repeal it in every fashion. I think that Obamacare has not worked. It's failed us. Lately, in this last week, we've seen a bill come out of the House that I would support. And basically, Obamacare said if you had employees and they worked over 30 hours, you had to give them coverage. This latest bill that just passed the House this last week said we're going to move that to 40 hours. I think that that is reasonable. A full-time worker is 40 hours by almost anybody's definition. I don't know where they got the 30-hour definition. But if that can pass and that can move through the Senate and we can get some movement on that, that would be a reform to Obamacare that would help quite a bit. But I've made it very clear when and if I get to Washington, D.C., healthcare would be a very big issue because Obamacare has affected this country in such a manner, not just from the healthcare standpoint, but from the economic standpoint.
How much should the federal minimum wage be, and why?
Well, we've just had this minimum wage discussion in Sacramento, and there was a bill to move it from $8 here in California to $9 and then to $10 within a 2-year period. I think that that is a very difficult discussion because no businesses were brought in on the discussion. This was an arbitrary number that we pulled out of the air and said that the businesses can and will be able to manage $9 an hour and will be able to manage $10 an hour. Now, there has been discussion in the Washington, D.C. level to do a $15.50 at the highest level. That means $15.50 at the federal level. Some discussion is going as high as that. Look, if we don't bring in the employers, if we don't bring in the business community into this discussion, and we think that as legislators or as politicians we can make this discussion right, they're wrong. What we need to do is go to the employers, go to the business community and say, what could you do, what could we get to in the next 10 years?
Where do most of your campaign contributions come from, and what are you doing to ensure victory in this election?
It's a very simple question. Every dollar I've raised has come from the district. CEMEX Valley, Santa Clarita, and Antelope Valley. That's where the money has come from. I haven't raised a dollar in Washington, D.C. I haven't raised a dollar in Beverly Hills. My donors are the people who want me to be their congressman, their voting congressman. So that is what we have addressed. That is where we have tried to talk to the people to say, look, if you send me, I actually live here. I am actually one of you. If I write a district bill, it's going to affect me just as much as it's going to affect you. So if that's someone that you want to support, and they do, they have donated, and we have hundreds and hundreds of donators that come from the district that want someone from the district to be their representative.
So what we'd like to know is what you would want to know from each other.
That's my question of Tony Strickland. Who are you going to vote for in this congressional race?
Well, I'm planning on voting for myself. In fact, I know you've made a lot of points in terms of where we live and kind of so on and so forth. You know, where we are today, if you map quest Steve where he lives and we map quest where I live currently, I'm 13 miles closer than Steve Knight. That's number one. Number two, in terms of Santa Clarita, I've actually represented the city of Santa Clarita for 4 years. Steve Knight's starting on his 2nd year. And number three, I believe people are more concerned about what you're going to do as a leader in the community and fight for that community. I represent a large portion of the district. I'm going to fight for every corner of this district, and I'm going to be a strong leader in Washington. People care more about where you stand than where you live. And by the way, I live 13 miles closer from where we are today than Steve Knight.
Do you think it's ever acceptable to allow for the federal government to shut down or default on its debts? Why or why not?
Well, no, it shouldn't default on its debts. There's no doubt about that. Look, I wouldn't have voted for raising the debt ceiling this last time. And many people have said, well, that would have shut down the government like it did previously. We have to have a better plan. We have to have a better mission. If every time, and we've done this 50 or 60 times over the last 20 years, we want to raise the debt ceiling because we are in a threat that's going to shut down the government if we don't, then we don't have a good plan. The plan should be that we need to balance. We need to do our mission as proposed by the Constitution and complete that mission. Right now, we are doing about 50 things that are outside of the Constitution. And so we get ourselves into a problem about every year or every 2 years, and we have to raise the debt ceiling. So I don't think that we should ever default. We wouldn't default, but I also don't think that we should put ourselves into a corner that we have to raise the debt ceiling when that is not the proper stance.
Last summer's Powerhouse fire renewed concerns about the U.S. Forest Service policy on firefighting, which has put homes and developments in the Santa Clarita Valley at risk. How do you weigh concerns for housing and development versus environmental priorities?
I've been very clear over the last 6 years. I think that people come first, and that is in every aspect. CEQA has been hurting this state in such a manner that reform is the only way that we are going to be able to move forward. That has been in effect for the last 40 years. It has been hurting the way that we can chart our course. Look, we're right now in the Santa Clarita Valley, and this is not a built-out area. In fact, this won't be built out for probably another 100 years. That means that the city council, that the supervisor, that the people that are in charge here have to be able to chart their own course. That means building out here. Building is going to be a big part of the next 50 years. So I support that, but on the issue of fires, I support technology too. We saw in the Yosemite fire that we used UAVs and UASs, and they were able to make sure that our firefighters were a little safer and make sure that we could attack those fires in a little better manner.
Thank you. And a closing statement from Steve Knight.
Thank you very much, Leon. Thank you for the panel. This has been a very good forum. I have a lifetime commitment to service. When I graduated Palmdale High School, I went into the United States Army, and I was a soldier under President Reagan. After that, I went into the Los Angeles Police Department. I was an 18-year police officer that served Porter Ranch, that served all over the city of Los Angeles. That is our commitment. I grew up with a father who was a United States Air Force pilot and fighter pilot in Vietnam. I live with my wife of almost 25 years now, who's a NICU RN, who works with babies that are measured by grams, not pounds. My son is a lifeguard at one of the biggest pools in North LA County. That is our commitment to the community. We want to help. That is what we want to do. We want to make things better. You're not going to hear me in every speech talk about one thing that was accomplished. Every speech I'm going to talk about different things because I've been in office for 6 years. I would hope that I've accomplished things. So I'll give you the very first bill that we ever passed. It was the Veterans Bond Act. It talked about the CalVet loans here in California. They were guaranteed against the general fund. We took them and created a 1943 fund and saved $8 million the first year. Over the next 20 years, we're going to save $250 million to our veterans, to the taxpayers. That is one thing that we've accomplished in the last 6 years. You won't hear me talk about that again because we've got other things that we've accomplished. I hope for your vote on June 3rd. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Steve Knight, Tony Strickland, Lee Rogers, candidates for 25th Congressional District in the election coming up on June 3rd. We had today asking the questions from COC Cougar News, Taylor Villanueva, from AM 1220 KHTS, Perry Smith, and from the Signal newspaper, Luke Money. I'm Leon Warden, reminding you to vote on June 3rd.